Every morning at exactly 7:15, Daniel Carter unlocked the front door of Maple Street Cafe. The little coffee shop sat on the corner of a busy business district, where office workers lined up before sunrise for their daily coffee. Daniel had owned the cafe for only 2 years. Before that, life had looked very different. He had worked as an accountant for a construction company until a sudden downsizing left him unemployed. Only months later, tragedy struck again. His wife, Sarah, passed away after a brief illness, leaving him to raise their 7-year-old daughter, Lily, alone. With little savings but a determination to rebuild their lives, Daniel bought the struggling cafe, using nearly everything he had left. The first year was difficult. Some days only a handful of customers walked through the door. Daniel worked every position himself. He brewed coffee, prepared breakfast, washed dishes, balanced the books after closing. Lily often sat in the corner after school, coloring while her father cleaned tables. She proudly told everyone, "My dad makes the best hot chocolate." The regular customers adored her. Despite the long hours, Daniel never complained. He believed kindness had a way of returning when least expected. One rainy Monday morning, a black luxury sedan stopped outside the cafe. A tall woman wearing a navy business suit stepped inside. She carried herself with quiet confidence. Everyone seemed to recognize her immediately. It was Victoria Lawson, CEO of Lawson Financial Group, whose headquarters occupied the glass tower across the street. Employees often described her as brilliant, disciplined, and impossible to impress. She approached the counter. "1 black coffee. No sugar." Daniel smiled warmly. "Coming right up." She thanked him politely, paid for her coffee, and walked away. When Daniel cleared her table 20 minutes later, he noticed something unusual. The coffee cost $11. The tip was exactly $9. Not 8. Not 10. Exactly 9. He smiled. That was generous. The next morning, she returned. The same order. The same quiet smile. The same $9 tip. Daniel assumed it was a coincidence. By the end of the week, he realized it wasn't. Every single visit ended with exactly $9 left beside the empty coffee cup. Not once did the amount change. Weeks became months. Rain or sunshine. Busy mornings or quiet afternoons. Victoria always ordered the same coffee. She always sat near the window. She always left exactly $9. The cafe staff began noticing. One waitress joked, "Maybe it's her lucky number." Another laughed. "Or maybe she doesn't like carrying $1 bills." Daniel shrugged. "I've stopped trying to guess." He quietly placed every $9 tip into a small glass jar labeled Lily's college fund. Lily noticed one afternoon. "Why don't you spend those?" Daniel smiled. "Someone is helping with your future." Lily carefully counted the bills. 9, 18, 27. She giggled. "It's always 9. Daniel nodded. "It certainly is." One evening, after closing the cafe, Lily asked, "Dad, have you ever asked her why?" Daniel shook his head. "It feels personal. If she wants me to know, she'll tell me." The routine continued for nearly 3 years. Victoria never stayed long. Sometimes she read reports. Sometimes she quietly watched people through the cafe window. She rarely spoke beyond thanking Daniel for the coffee. Yet she never missed the $9 tip. One snowy morning, a new employee accidentally returned the extra money. "Ma'am," he called, "you left too much." Victoria smiled. "No, I left exactly what I intended." She quietly placed the $9 back on the table. Daniel noticed the exchange, but still said nothing. Later that afternoon, Lily looked at the growing college jar. "Dad, how much is in there now?" Daniel smiled. "Enough that someone clearly believes in your future." Neither of them realized that Victoria's reason for leaving exactly $9 had nothing to do with generosity, luck, or spare change. It was connected to a promise she had made 9 years earlier. A promise that began with one frightened little girl, one exhausted single father, and a rainy night they had both almost forgotten. Daniel couldn't stop thinking about Victoria's final words. "A promise I made 9 years ago." The next Tuesday morning arrived like every other. At exactly 7:15 a.m., the familiar black sedan stopped outside Maple Street Cafe. Victoria entered, smiled politely, and ordered her usual black coffee. This time, before she could sit down, Daniel gently spoke. "I hope you don't mind me asking." She looked up. "The $9. You said it was connected to a promise." Victoria was quiet for a moment. Then she smiled. "I think it's finally time you knew." She carried her coffee to the corner table and invited Daniel to sit for a few minutes while another employee covered the counter. 9 years earlier, Victoria had been a young executive working 80-hour weeks. Her company was struggling. She was exhausted, overwhelmed, and questioning every decision she had made. One stormy evening, after an especially difficult board meeting, she stopped at a small roadside diner. As she walked in, she noticed a little girl sitting alone in a booth with coloring pencils. Across the room, her father hurried between tables, taking orders and serving customers. Victoria remembered thinking how tired he looked. When the meal ended, she realized she had forgotten her wallet at the office. Embarrassed, she quietly explained the situation to the waiter. Before anyone could respond, the young father walked over. "It's all right," he said. "I'll cover it." Victoria insisted she would return the money the next day. He smiled. "You don't owe me anything." She glanced at the receipt. The bill came to exactly $9. Before leaving, she thanked him. He simply replied, "I hope someone shows my daughter the same kindness if she ever needs it." Victoria never forgot those words. The following afternoon, she returned to the diner intending to repay him, but it had permanently closed overnight. The owner had retired unexpectedly. She never learned the man's name. Years passed. Her business grew. She became a CEO, but she often wondered what had happened to the kind single father who had helped a stranger without expecting anything in return. Then one morning, while grabbing coffee before work, she recognized him instantly. It was Daniel. Older, a little more gray in his hair, but the same warm smile, the same kindness. Victoria admitted, "I wanted to repay you, but returning $9 didn't feel meaningful. So I decided that every time I visited your cafe, I'd leave the same amount you once spent on me. I hoped that one day you'd ask." Daniel sat silently. He had completely forgotten the encounter. He smiled softly. "I remember that rainy night now. You looked like you'd had the hardest day in the world." Victoria laughed. "I probably had." Daniel looked toward the glass jar labeled Lily's college fund. "I never spent your tips. They all went in there." Victoria smiled at Lily, who had just arrived after school. "You know, I think your father has been teaching people long before he realized it." Lily looked curiously at Daniel. "What did you teach her?" Daniel smiled. "That kindness isn't an investment. You shouldn't expect it back." Several weeks later, Victoria quietly established a scholarship in Sarah's memory for children of single parents pursuing higher education. She asked Daniel for only one condition. "Don't name it after me. It belongs to the people who choose kindness." Years later, Lily graduated from university. During her speech, she held up an old glass jar. "When I was little, I thought this jar was filled with money." She smiled. "My father eventually taught me it was actually filled with something much more valuable. Gratitude." In every $9 gift was a reminder that one small act of kindness can continue changing lives long after the moment has passed. The audience stood and applauded. Victoria quietly wiped away a tear. After the ceremony, Daniel thanked her. She shook her head. "No, I'm still thanking you." People remembered the story because a successful CEO always left a single dad a $9 tip at his cafe. But those who knew the whole story understood that the number itself was never important. It represented a forgotten act of generosity from a man who expected nothing in return. Sometimes the smallest kindness, a simple meal, a few dollars, or a compassionate gesture, creates a ripple that returns years later in ways no one could ever imagine.